Hello and good evening and welcome to episode 15 of Montague Island Books. Now, we've been missing for a couple of weeks because we've had a couple of different things going on and a couple of rearranges, but we are back now. We've got another chat tomorrow and we've got a couple next week as well. But I'm very pleased to welcome our guest this evening. Now, our guest, I've had to use Amazon to get some information on him because there's not a great deal of info on his website. I thought, well, Amazon's probably the best place. Anyway, he's an award-winning author based on the Wirral Peninsula in the UK. It's a stretch of land, it says here, that separates Liverpool from North Wales and was described in Arthurian legend as a haunt of people loved by neither God nor man. Now, I didn't say that. That's come from his bio. Now, despite this, our guest has a deep affection for the place and loves walking his dogs and exploring the land of his birth. When he's not plotting crimes, he enjoys playing mandolin, guitar and bass in various local sessions. And I'm very pleased to welcome tonight Jonathan or Jon or J.E. Mayhew. Good evening, Jon. How are you?
Hiya, Joe. Hiya.
You okay?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Really so that was my bit of the bio. I apologise if anything was wrong, but it was down to Amazon. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your books.
Yeah. So as the bio said there, I was born on the Wirral, on the Mersey side of the Wirral, which you can probably tell from my accent. But I live over on the D side of the Wirral now. It's a bit posher. So I've lived here all my life, and I'm an author of, must be more than 30 books now, maybe more. And I write crime. I write the DCI Will Blake series, which is based on the Wirral Peninsula. There's just writing the seventh book of that. Yeah, the seventh book of that series at the moment. We're just polishing it off. And prior to starting this series, I was also a children's author, published by all kinds of Bloomsbury, HarperCollins. I recently had a book out with UClan called The Spybrarian, which was great fun to write. That was really good. So I've kind of covered a lot of bases, really. I live here with my wife and grown-up family now. They've all kind of moved out and moved away, but my youngest son still haunts the upper bedroom there, working from home, thanks to the old lockdown. So, but yeah, everyone else has flown the coop, really. And so I spend my days, torturing various instruments and enjoying writing and enjoying the landscape, really. So that's kind of me.
You're living, isn't it? It's a great place. Especially if you get a bit of nice weather. But can't have everything, can we?
Hopeful.
Yeah. So are all of your crime books published independently, or
they're indie books. So they're available on Amazon at the moment, and on Kindle Unlimited as well. My children's books are available in bookshops across the country, really. So the children's book I'm most famous for is a book called Mortlock, and the trilogy there are kind of dark Gothic fantasy set in Victorian London. So they're great fun if you like a few chills, and they're good for kids from aged, I'd say 9 up to 90 plus. Anyone who wants to have a go at them.
And are you still writing children's fiction, or are you just concentrating on the crime now?
At the moment, I'm focusing mainly on the crime. The main reason for that is because with lockdown, one of the things that children's authors do to live really is visit schools, and of course schools are opening up again, but workshops and paid school visits were very much part of my income up until March of 2020, and then suddenly it all just went. I'd been tinkering around with a crime series anyway, and I kind of got the bulk of the books kind of mapped out in my head. So I just thought, well, I'll just do what I'm meant to do and just write, and yeah,
it's working.
It saved my bacon. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's been a blast. It's been really good. It's been great fun. You know, the feedback's been fantastic, and just getting to know the characters, and yeah, it's really good. So maybe I should mention a little bit about the crime books and the characters in there. So the main character is DCI Will Blake, and he's part of Merseyside Police. The conceit is that I base all the adventures, all the investigations around the Wirral, which is quite a small place, really. So, I mean, I kind of imagine that in his spare time, or his other adventures are kind of, you know, up in Sefton, or, you know, but I focus on the Wirral adventures because I think there's quite a lot of Liverpool detectives, really. So why not have something a little bit different? So yeah, Will Blake is a huge, you know, the archetypal suffering detective. He's also hampered by his name because everyone quotes Tiger at him all the time. But unfortunate for them, he's the only one that actually knows it off by heart. So he just sits back and goes, carry on, you know, and everyone sort of fizzles out after the second line or something, you know. But he's also hamstrung by the fact that he used to be in a kind of crime watch type program called Searchlight. He was, when he was a young detective or young constable, his bosses basically said, "Oh, you're pretty easy on the eye. We'll send you off to do that." And so he's got this kind of cult following of weirdos and yeah, and some of them are criminal as well, who basically remember him from the days when he was on Searchlight, and he introduced the CCTV section, you know, and the corner shop robberies and the fuzzy images of people in balaclavas. That's all he did, but he's got this kind of cult status which he hates because his bosses use it to basically as a stick to beat him with, you know. So he's always trying to hunt the limelight down, and people are always asking for his autograph. On the Wirral, in this little place called Rock Park, which is it's a fascinating area, really. It's towards Birkenhead, and it used to be where it was like the Beverly Hills of Liverpool. It was where all the great and the good who owned all kinds of shipping companies over on the Wirral, over in Liverpool. They all lived on the Wirral in these big villas, and of course they kind of crumbled, and you know, and changed use, and all kinds of things happened. So the Wirral Council, in their wisdom, knocked a load of them down and put a dual carriageway right through the middle of them. Right. So there's a little strip of houses, old Victorian villas, right on the River Mersey.
Was it Jonathan that posted on Facebook a few months ago about a little island?
Yes, that's right. That's further up. Yeah. So that's up towards Stanlow. Yeah. Stanlow Island. That's right. So yeah, there's lots of little places like that. And so Blake is stuck in this house. He used to belong to his mother, and she had dementia, and he was looking after her. And she wandered off and disappeared, and never saw her again. And so he's kind of wrestling with all these sort of things that have happened in his past. He lives in this big old house, and and he basically tries and keeps the day job going. And in the meantime, the house is haunted by, not literally, but, you know, by his psychotic cat, Persian cat, Serafina, who hates everyone. And basically he feels this attachment for her. But so most of the books have got a kind of Serafina adventure. She goes missing, or she gets ill, or so he's always trying to juggle that as well. So, you know, there's all kinds of things going on. They're busy books, really, but a great fun to write. Really good fun. And
how many books are in the series now, John?
At the moment, there are 6 books in the series. I'm just working on the 7th. Or is it? So there are 7 books in the series. I'm just working on the 8th. Yeah, that's right. So yeah.
And they're all out on Amazon, are they? Yeah.
Yeah.
And are they a case of you're better? You know, is it a proper series in that it starts at book 1 and goes through, or could you jump in anywhere?
I've always thought, ever since, even when I wrote children's books, and I wrote 2 series, I always feel that you'd be able to pick up a book and read it in its entirety and think that was a good book. I really don't, personally, I just don't enjoy something if you read it and you think, oh, hang on a minute, this is like the middle of something, so yeah, I very much would say they're written as standalones. There's a little, if there are threads running through them, obviously, but there's enough explanation that you would be fine. You wouldn't have to read the whole series. You could just, and I've also, what I did at book 5 was I paused really, and I sent Blake off on an adventure up to Scotland. And there was a deliberate reason for that. So what I wanted to do is make a good jump-in book. If you didn't want to, if you just felt, because I often, look at a series on, in a bookshop or on Amazon or whatever, and I think, 15 books in that series, I'll never do that, Whereas I think, well, if you can jump in halfway, or so yeah, they're all standalone, effectively, but they link up to make a good, a good series.
Right.
Yeah.
And perhaps you can just let us all know about where people can contact you on your, on social media and your website. Yeah,
so my Facebook page is, the author page is J.E. Mayhew, so J.E. Mayhew. That's on Facebook. Yeah, I have got I have got a blog spot somewhere. It's probably J.E. Mayhew blogspot. Yeah.
Google it. Yeah.
Yeah. I have got an. You can email me on Jon at jonmayhew.co.uk. That's easy enough. Yeah. And there is a jonmayhew.co.uk, but that's largely my children's books. So if you want to find out about them. But yeah, it's essentially, if you Google Jon Mayhew or J.E. Mayhew, you'll find my website. Well, it's a blog spot, really.
And I'm presuming, because you're independently, I'm presuming all the crime books are just Kindle, are they?
They're paperback. Paperback, Audible, and Kindle as well. And they're on Kindle Unlimited. Right. So yeah, like to make as wide an offer as possible, really. And the Audibles, the audiobooks are narrated by a young man called Owen Welsh, who is it was quite an interesting story, but we decided to have the audiobooks recorded, and I have to be careful what I say here. I've listened to some audiobooks based in this area, and the actors are great, but then the Scouse accent comes in, and you think, what is going on there? So we wanted a native, basically, to narrate them. We found Owen, a young man who's just come out of LIPA, Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, walked out of that straight into the lockdown.
Wow. Furloughed
from this little job that he had in the in this clothes shop. So, he's struggling a bit, and but fair play, he put himself out there to do voice work. And so we thought, well, we'll go with him and give him that chance. And he's been fantastic. He's really kind of risen to the challenge, and you can kind of hear him grow through the series. So that's great as well.
Great. And does he make the characters sound like you have them in your head?
Yes. Great. Yeah. And there have been moments where, he obviously consults with us, and we've been like, oh no, not that, or go away and find out about that accent, and it's worked quite well,
Right.
But yeah, and it's just nice to be able to, the whole, as I say, this time last year, basically, I wondered what was going to happen, really, and I guess Owen was in a similar kind of situation, really. So it's been great for all of us, really. It's been a real positive, and it's just been so much fun writing.
And it's great when you've got somebody local who you can, knowledge both ways. And
yeah,
I was listening to an interview with someone the other day, and they were saying it's so hard to record an audiobook. People just think it's, right, get in front of a microphone and read a book. But there was somebody, I forget who it was now, quite a famous author, and they decided to do, I think it was the prologue. There was only a little chapter, and I think it was only 2 or 3 pages, and they decided to do the audio themselves. And it was a nightmare. Took them ages, retake after retake after retake. They said never again.
No, absolutely, yeah. It is. It's a skill set of all of its own, and it's. I mean, it's great if you can just do a read. I will read my extracts from the books. And it's something that, as a traveling author, it was something that I did an awful lot. But yeah, the idea of reading a whole book, 7 hours, 8 hours.
Yeah. And there was somebody else on that they had a particular, they were like a professional audiobook narrator, and they would have a set routine of every day what they had. So they'd have like a glass of lemon juice and something else, I forget what it was, just to make the voice nice and clear, and that was like the routine. So it's definitely not just a case of sitting down and reading a book.
Absolutely.
But
you've got to have all the gear.
Interesting story to hear. So right, John, so what we'll do is we'll now whisk you off to Montague Island off the Cumbrian coast. And you can take 7 books with you.
Excellent.
Your own choice. So what's your first book going to be?
So my first book is going to be Holes by Louis Sachar. It's a children's book. I say that, but actually, honestly, it's a great book for anyone to read. So this book kind of came into my consciousness. When did it come out? It must have been. It was a long time ago I found out about it. So 1998 it came out. It must have been 20 odd years ago. And I was a teacher then. I was teaching a class, and I kind of finished the day and I was a bit tired, and I thought I'll probably go home in a minute, but I'll just have a look start reading this book just to, so started planning the next term's work, so I'll just have a read of this book. And the next thing I knew, the caretaker was standing behind me, and he said, "Are you going home tonight?" Or because I want to go and watch the telly, and hadn't even realised the time had just gone. It was 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I was lost in this book. It's a really short book. It's about a boy called Stanley Yelnats, and he's accused of stealing some celebrity sneakers, like training shoes, belong to a basketball player. They've been given to a charity to sell, and somehow he ends up being accused of stealing them, and he gets sent to a place called Camp Green Lake. And Camp Green Lake is not green, and it's nowhere near a lake. It used to be a lake, but it's dried out, and it's got this story behind it. And so basically he has to go to Camp Green Lake, and there's a load of other kids. It's like a kind of correctional facility out in the middle of nowhere, this desert. And the only creatures that live there are these spotted red lizards, which are deadly poison. And it's a really hostile environment. And he has to go out every day and dig a hole 5 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 5 feet deep. And there's a little gang of them who have to do this. And then it breaks into 3, maybe 4 stories. One's the family history of Stanley Yelnats. One is the history of Camp Green Lake. I think there's another tale as well, but they kind of weave in and out of each other. And so it kind of keeps jumping back in time, and it's so beautifully done. And at the end of it, every single part of this book ties together,
right?
And it is so clever. It really is. And you read this to a group of kids, and I've read this to the most disaffected, you're like not interested kids, and by the end of it, they're eating out the palm of your hand, and they want to know how it ends. And it's great, it's a easily digestible book. Very short chapters. You can run through it in a few hours, but it's such a reward. And if you haven't seen the film, don't watch it. Read the book first. Even though Louis Sachar wrote the screenplay for the film, the book, the payoff from the book, it's one of those ones where you suddenly realise, you think, yeah, this is what reading's all about, actually. Great story, really clever, just everything tied together. So, and also, the other thing that always puts me, I like crime, I like reading crime. But I find it kind of bleeds into all kinds of other things. So this is essentially, it's a crime book. He's in a correctional facility, and he's trying to, he runs away in the end. It's not a spoiler. He tries to run away. And yeah, that's part of his sort of story. But it's all tied up with a crime. So it's a crime book. So that's Holes by Louis Sachar. I wouldn't be without that.
And it's wonderful that it gets, as you said, by you reading it in classroom, I'm sure it's got a lot of other kids interested in reading as well.
Absolutely. And this is the one book that I have to constantly buy new copies of, because I'm always giving it away. I don't know if you've got a book like that, but I keep having to rebuy it, because and when I do bookshop events for my children's books, I end up selling as many of these as my own books sometimes. It's ridiculous. So I'm like, stop going on about this book. Tell them about your own.
So where's the author from? Is he French or?
He's American. American. Yeah. It's all set in America. Although Camp Green Lake is this strange. You wouldn't know where it was really, but sort of desert region. But and Louis Sachar's a cracking author. Very, very good.
Great book. Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I'm sure we'll have a few people going out to get that one and giving that a read. So that's great. And what's your second book going to be, John?
So in the same vein, and this is the only copy I've got of this, which is a rather shonky copy of Great Expectations by Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
Great Expectations as kind of I did this book at O-level, and we had to read it about 3 times. And the first time I read it, I couldn't stand it. And the second time I read it, I thought, oh gosh, yeah, that's quite interesting. The third time I read it, I started to think, actually, there's a good story here. And then weirdly, I'm sure it's not allowed, and hopefully no one will come and take me qualifications away from me. I ended up doing it for A-level as well, which was quite bizarre. So I had to read it again, only in more depth. And then when I went to college, to university, I had to read it again, because we did it again. So as I say, it's probably not allowed. It's probably dreadfully illegal, but again, what I love about the story is again that the way everything ties together. There isn't a character wasted in that book, in Great Expectations. Even the leg iron that Orlick, Joe Gargery's criminal apprentice, even that is used to kill Mrs. Joe. It's like just, and at the end, you're like, I suppose I shouldn't spoil it, but even Jagger's serving maid is a character from the backstory, and it is all just, you're just kind of like, wow, that is so clever. That is all just tied together so neatly, rather like Holes as well. They're just so well crafted.
It is great when you get to a character and think, what's this character got to do with it? And by the time you get to the end, it's it's just another piece of the jigsaw, and you didn't see it at all. And again, I guess it's, I would class that as a crime book. Philip Pip is horrified by his connections with the underworld that he didn't even know he had. It'd be quite fun to do a kind of modern
not that terrible film version they modernized it, but do some kind of modern version of that where somebody finds out they're attached to some terrible gangland family or something, but so Great Expectations is another one, and of course the David Lean film always sticks in my mind as well when I think about that one. So that's book 2.
Great. And it'll be a one that a lot of people will recognise. And again, it's a great one to get people back into reading, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you like for Dickens as well, it's one of his kind of lighter books in a way. It isn't kind of a hugely dense book. It's one that you can navigate quite quickly, but enjoy the characters and things. So great. So
that's number 2. So what's your number 3 going to be?
So book 3 is, I don't know if you can see it, I love this book, absolutely love it. I've got it the wrong way around. No, it's just,
it looks a big book.
It's the Penguin Book of English Folk Songs.
Wow.
So folk music's always been a bit of a thing for me. I've always enjoyed traditional music. I play in ceilidh bands around the Northwest, and I love the sense of history. I love the window it gives on our culture as well. The whole thing just fascinates me, and each of these songs is a story.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a cheat as well, because I'm probably packing in here probably about 400 stories. Now this is, and again I've cheated as well, because this is the original Penguin Book of, I always call it the English Book of Penguin Folk Songs, which is kind of like, but that's the original, and as you can see, it's a very slim volume. And basically Steve Roud, who's a folklorist, he's beefed it up and put quite a lot of commentary in it.
By looking at the size of it, by the time you've read it, you can use it as a weapon.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I might be able to defend myself with it, or go hunting with it. I might be able to kill fish with it or something. And every now and then, there's just these lovely kind of cuttings, etchings and things in the middle of it. The cover's beautiful.
It is.
You can just hold that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
It's just one of them books, that, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely.
And it'll keep you going for a while as well, won't it?
Yeah, and again on the island, I'm guessing no one will hear me sing.
No.
So I can have a little go at working out the tunes and
definitely
have a little sing song. Yeah,
that's great, and something a little bit different too. So that's good. So what's book number 4 going to be, John?
Book number 4. Book number 4 is Lord of the Rings. I haven't actually got a copy of that here because my son, I suddenly realised he told me before Christmas, he said, I've been reading Lord of the Rings. I'm kind of like, okay. He obviously got hold of the book somehow, unless he bought it himself. But yeah, I haven't got a copy of that here. But so it would actually be, again, being a bit of a chancer again, basically it would be the trilogy in one book. The 1970s version with the yellow trees around the edge. That kind of iconic book. I've read it a few times. I have one very fond memory of, and it's a weird one really. I felt I had. We were talking before, weren't we? I had one of them things called a cold. Do you remember them? Colds. Just like a cold, I didn't feel very well, and I didn't have to take a test or anything, but I was off for a good few days, and I just sat in front of the fire and read Lord of the Rings from cover to cover, just wrapped in a blanket, and
that's the time to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I thought, well, I'm going to have lots of time on this island, so it would be great just to dive back into that world, and it's just a great. It's a cracking story. And there's just so many elements to it, and so many different strands and stories within stories and
world building as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that would be my kind of my next book of choice, really. And again, it's funny really, because I love the films as well, but there's so much missing from the films in the books, and they do kind of tie up with the folklore and the and the traditional side of that as well. In some ways, it kind of lost its its kind of Britishness in a way that in one way, but when it was filmed, but I still love those films. They're great. But yeah, so that would be Lord of the Rings would be my next.
And you've got the sort of folky element of it, and it's sort of, you know, from all the books, it wraps it all up as well into a story, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, and if you want classic fantasy, then it's got elves, it's got orcs, it's got goblins, it's got hobbits, it's got everyone, wizards and witches, and you know, the lot. So
can't go wrong with that, can you? No,
absolutely, absolutely.
And what's your next book going to be?
The next one is, and I'm cheating again, I'm a terrible cheat, is the collected works of M.R. James. M.R. James, if people don't know, was I would say a horror writer in the early 1900s, and I think he was kind of fellow at I think it was Cambridge, and every Christmas he used to write a ghost story for people in his the gentlemen in his college, and they'd all sit down and he'd read them these ghost stories. But they're great, they're really good. And one of my favorites is Lost Hearts, which is basically it's a hideous story about this man who is cutting the hearts out of children to prolong his life, and they come back to get him. And it's fantastic. Yeah, there's just some great stories. And the other thing about them, although that sounds quite gory, it isn't especially. They're strange tales, really, generally. You know, they're a bit uncanny, they're unusual. I think one of the most famous ones is Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad, which is about a man who finds a bone whistle on the beach, and he absent-mindedly blows it and, you know, summons up this shapeless, formless, threatening thing that just follows him around, and and it gets closer and closer. And so I thought, well, that'd be a nice thing to read when I'm all on my own in a dark island off the coast of Cumbria.
With the gales blowing and
because you got to frighten yourself every now and then. But M.R. James was one of the people, or the storytellers who got me writing in the first place. So when I wrote Mortlock, which was my first book, then M.R. James was one of the inspirations from that. And of course the other one was W.W. Jacobs, who wrote The Monkey's Paw. So those kind of early ghost storytellers really inspire me, and so and the great thing about a short story book is you can dip in and out of it, can't you? You don't have to read it from cover to cover.
That's right.
Which again is something that it's interesting on a lot of the Facebook sites and things where people have been saying, can't get into reading again. Short stories are a great way into that, just to get you back in the habit. I always say that to kids as well. If you've fallen out of love with reading, get a short story book and just read the middle one. Don't think I've got to read all that. Pick a short story and go for it.
That's right.
I love those.
Have you done any short story collections, John?
Yeah. They're connected with Mortlock. There's a collection called. It's only available on Kindle, unfortunately, because I kind of brought them all together after Mortlock had come out, and for a long time those short stories were on the kind of Bloomsbury website, but then that something happened to the Bloomsbury. I don't know whether it got hacked or whatever, but it's no longer a Mortlock website. It's some kind of advert for Japanese condoms or something, but very bizarre. Anyway, so I collected these stories together and I put them in a little anthology called Mr. Grimhurst's Treasure and Other Stories, and they have the characters from the Mortlock tales, and they are they're ghost stories and along the vein of M.R. James, so obviously not as great as that. If you want great, just creepy stories, Chris Priestley is the man to go to. Uncle Montague's Tales of Terror Oh, Uncle Montague, yeah, Montague Island. I hadn't thought of that. Chris is a mate of mine. He's a Bloomsbury author. He's a cracking guy, and he writes the weirdest stuff you're ever going to read. Brilliant. It's for kids, but again, beautifully illustrated, lovely.
Sometimes with kids, the weirder the better.
Yeah, exactly. Great short stories, but again, for anyone really, just really good.
Great.
Yeah.
So what are we on now? I've got lost. Are we on 6 or 7 now?
I think we're on 6. We're on book 6, and book 6 is this again. This is an old one. This is actually Charles Dickens again, and it's Charles Dickens's Christmas books. Right. So it's A Christmas Carol, The Chimes, Cricket on the Hearth, the Battle of Life, and The Haunted Man. But it's Christmas Carol, really. If I had to just take one, it would be Christmas Carol. I love that story. I read it every year. It's a Sunday afternoon read, and again, just the genius that went into that. I mean, he wrote that in such a short time, and it changed everyone's life.
Yeah. And it's still as popular today, isn't it? It's,
exactly. Yeah. And again, if you want to talk about writing a character arc, how does the character begin and how do they end the story? Have a look at Ebenezer Scrooge. It's almost like a skeleton of a story. You can see it. You can see the bones. But the flesh on the story is just so rewarding as well. So every Christmas I would, sit in my cave and read that by candlelight.
Yeah, that's great. Another great choice and another popular one as well. Yeah, so what's your final book?
My final book is one that I wasn't a great reader when I was a kid for various reasons. But this book, this kind of... it really spoke to me, and I've read it so many times, and you can see that Moominland Midwinter.
Oh yeah,
by Tove Jansson, and I love this book. I absolutely love it. Again, Tove Jansson wrote for children and for adults as well, but actually, there's so much going on in this book that, again, as an adult, I could read this and enjoy it. In Moominland Midwinter, the Moomins are these cute little, you can see the image there, is it kind of round-nosed, white, fluffy creatures, and they live in a house in Finland, and every winter they hibernate. They eat their meal of pine needles and stoke up the stove with peat, and then they all just bury themselves in blankets and they wake up in spring.
We should have done that last March, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, too right. I keep trying to, but people wake me up. But in this story, Moomin Troll, who's the kind of main character, he wakes up in the middle of winter, and it's a completely different place. The Moomin Valley that he lives in is normally populated by cheerful and friendly creatures, and there's a whole different gang who live in Moomin Valley in the winter, and some of them are really strange and some of them are really weird. And and suddenly he's kind of on the outside. And it is weird reading this as a young lad, and then as a teenager reading it again, and that that everyone feels a little bit on the outside when they're that age, and just it really kind of spoke to me. Very strange. And he encounters all kinds of strange people, and things happen to him, which he has all kinds of small adventures. Then none of them are like earth-shattering. He's never going to die, but there are strange forces at work in the winter, and it's just quite a philosophical book, really. It's quite a thoughtful book, and I used to read it because again, I had a torch, but like the battery ran out quite quickly, and so what I used to do was I had this old biscuit tin. And on the inside of biscuit tins, it's silver. Yeah. So what I used to do was like when I had gone to bed, I'd get me like my mum and dad would be downstairs watching the telly or whatever, but I'd get them to leave the landing light on. Leave the landing light on. Oh, yeah. So I'd leave the landing light on, and then I'd open the door a little bit and put this biscuit tin on the cupboard at the foot of my bed, and it would reflect the light onto my pillow. And that's why I wear glasses now. It's terrible. But yeah, and that's how I used to read.
Wow, that's a story.
Yeah. So that's kind of. But yeah, the Moomin books, I love them all. But the winter one there's just something. There's an atmosphere about it, and it's really special to me. So again, that would kind of take me back, and also that idea of isolation. It would be a good book to kind of comfort me in my loneliness.
In your little island, Well, that's great choices. Now, for people that tune in but don't know, Montague Island was a fictional book, a fictional island created by Mike Craven.
Yep.
And so that's where it all come about in one of his books.
Yep.
So there's a Kindle on the island waiting for you that's got all these books in. So you
and let's face it, like, who needs the Bible or Shakespeare when you've got all of Mike Craven's books?
I thought, well, I'm not going to put a Bible or Shakespeare. I'll put something different. So that was why we decided on that.
And they'd be more than welcome. I love those books. They're fantastic. Really
great books. Yeah. So now, as well as the books, and on the island, by the way, while you're there, it is believed that there's electricity for about an hour a day.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So you do get a bit of time. So you're allowed to take one CD with you. So that can be music. It can be, audio, whatever you might choose.
Yeah.
So what would your CD be?
My CD would be, I can hold it up. It would be Hawkwind, Space Ritual. Yeah, this is a double album. I'll see if I can bring it out here.
You have to get it on CD because you wouldn't have a record player.
I know. You got to get it on CD, but yeah, I've only got the vinyl. You see that, but this is a great vinyl. But I love Hawkwind, and I'm a bit of a fan of kind of heavy rock generally, and the reason I get this is because it's largely a live album. It's got Lemmy, who went on to found Motorhead, which again I'm a big fan of that music. Seen them so many times, seen Hawkwind so many times. And it is there's just so much going on there. There's kind of rock, there's all sorts, and there's even poetry on there, and there's bits of work from Michael Moorcock as well, because what I haven't been able to, in those 7 books, it's never enough. There's a whole work of Michael Moorcock, which I'd love to take along as well. So there's some of his work on that album, and there's just some great kind of rock songs, some great science fiction stories. So yeah, that would be Space Ritual. Also as well, I read an article recently where Ian Rankin, I was really heartened by this, because I always think I'm a bit of an old dinosaur, really, like in Hawkwind and stuff. But yeah, Ian Rankin actually wrote an article about Space Ritual and how it changed his life, Wow. So I'm in good company, I reckon.
Definitely.
So I'm quite happy about that.
I think Mike Craven actually is into quite heavy music. I think he's more punk based, but he likes quite sort of heavy stuff as well.
I think I've seen him with a Maiden t-shirt on or something like that. Yeah, definitely, which is all good stuff.
I think there's a few authors that are well into the music, which is good.
Yeah.
So and one thing on the island, you're on your own, so you can play it nice and loud.
Exactly. Yeah. I can turn it up to 11. Yeah.
So the next item you can take is a DVD. Now, again, it can be, it can be a film, it can be a TV series, or it could be a music concert or whatever. So what DVD would you take?
So the DVD I would take, and I thought long and hard about this, because there are all sorts of classics that I'd quite like to take along. But actually, I think the time I would watch a DVD, and the time I really enjoy watching a DVD or a film the most is I like a comfort DVD, and my go-to comfort DVD is the Grand Budapest Hotel,
Right.
Wes Anderson, and again, such a quirky tale. It's got comedy in it. It's got a bit of tragedy. It's got a bit of romance. It's got a bit of everything, really. Yeah, and it's and the soundtrack's great. I love the kind of zither music and all that sort of Tyrolean yodeling and stuff. So I could practice a bit of that as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good choice and something a little bit different as well. So that's great. Now, another thing that you get to take with you is a food item. Now, this can be a meal that you particularly like, or a particular type of food that you would miss while on the island. So what are you going to take, John, as your food item?
Yeah, fish and chips, I'm afraid. It's got to be fish and chips. Yeah. I kind of thought, oh, curry, but, actually, chippy tea once in a while.
Just make sure you add on the salt and vinegar as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. Well, I'd get that off the sea. I'd get the salt off the sea somehow, But, yeah, definitely, chippy tea.
Can't beat a chippy tea, can you? So that's a great one.
Yeah.
And finally, you've got a luxury item, which can be absolutely anything. So we've had some weird suggestions, from a camper van to a pillow to all kinds of things.
A camper van? That's blooming cheating now, isn't it? Flipping out, yeah. I'll have a B&B.
Have a hotel,
yeah, luxury spa. It's a bit of a boring answer, really, but I'd have an endless supply of paper and pens. And I'd write stories inspired by these, the small number of books that I've got there. So hopefully, when they found my sort of bleached bones on the moors of Montague Island, they'd also found a library full of my books, and that
is brilliant. I think that's probably one of the best ones we've had. That so. I do like the idea of that. So, you're going to have things to keep you occupied while you're on the while you're on the island, with all your great book choices and your other choices as well. So so that's really good. So we hope you have a great time on the island. So just to finish off, John, I want to just remind anyone who maybe like watching it when it's up on you. This will be going on YouTube and on social media tomorrow. So do you just want to remind everyone about your books, what you're on at the moment?
Absolutely,
and where people can contact you.
Yeah. So I'll just grab a copy actually. So Poison Tree. I should have done that before. So that's my. I'm a rubbish salesman. The Poison Tree is the first in the DCI Will Blake series, and you can find that on Amazon all over the world, really. And it's J.E. Mayhew. Yeah, and you can find me on Facebook. And just hanging around social media generally. Twitter, J.E. Mayhew. Pretty simple, really. Great.
Wonderful. Well, many thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great time on the island, and keep us informed of all your book updates and what have you as you go along.
I will indeed. Thank you very much for having me, Joe. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate. Bye.